Not all passports are created equal. For some, it's a golden ticket, opening borders, job safety, and spontaneous travel. For others, it's harassment, a barrier stamped with suspicion, or a no questions asked, locked door. Today, we're looking at the politics of passports and citizenship, who gets protected and respected, and who gets turned away. I'm Stefanie Dekker, and this is The Stream.
People with passport privilege have no idea what the rest of the world has to go through to get visas and to travel.
So this is my passport application form, invitation letter, proof of accommodation, hotel reservation.
There is always this prejudiced behavior to think that there is some illegal immigration activities going on.
That is called passport privilege. So next time your friend says how they've got a new job and they're traveling across the world, just think why it's okay for them to do that, but it's not okay for people seeking safety to do the same thing.
Oh, hell no, man. What the man?
Millions of people around the world are stateless and without a nationality. Opening a bank account, going to school, traveling, getting married may not be possible.
It's like me being a caged bird. I could hop around the cage, but I cannot truly fly out of this cage.
Now, should your nationality limit your access to the world? From refugees stuck in limbo to having to apply for a visa every time you want to travel and running the real risk of having it rejected. There's the have-nots, and then there are the haves. Millions of citizens of powerful countries who can travel wherever they want, when they want. So today, we're asking, is it fair to have the place where you were born define how you can travel? Well, we are joined by Amal Chickera, human rights advocate and activist, who co-leads the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion. He joins us from London. We have Christy Chitengu, a human rights lawyer and co-lead of the global movement against statelessness. She joins us from Williamsburg, Virginia in the US. And we have Dimitri, Kochenov, a professor at Central European University Democracy Institute and author of the book Citizenship. He joins us from Budapest in Hungary. Dimitri, let me start off our discussion with you. The concept of passport privilege, how would you define it?
Well, passport is just a document that comes with your citizenship. So when we speak about passport privilege, we speak about the lack of equality among different citizenships around the world. The world is based on the idea of sovereign equality of states, but the sovereign equality of states is a fiction, and this fiction doesn't translate into equal rights and equal treatment that different citizens receive elsewhere in the world, including in their own home as well.
Christy, you didn't have a passport for a long time. Just to fill our viewers in on your story, you were born in South Africa to Zimbabwean parents who were classified as undocumented migrants. What does a passport give to people that so many take for granted?
Having a passport really enables one to freely move out of their home. It opens your mind to, it impacts your ability to move and the freedom of movement, and it also opens your opportunities to get employed and to study further. And so once I was able to obtain a passport last year, it really expanded my breadth in terms of travel and opportunity. And it almost, like the video in the introduction, it makes you not feel like a caged bird, because without it, you feel very contained.
I just want to elaborate with you on that. How does that feel? Because so many of us take a passport for granted. You were in limbo for so very long. How does that feel like?
It feels very liberating, and it's a very emotive experience where you feel like you're tied between these colonially constructed borders, and to be able to leave them, you don't know which side of the border you belong, and if you leave, you're often seen as illegal, and that term in itself is difficult because you were born into that system that excluded you. And so it's a very conflicting feeling, very emotive, and I think that the video captured it so succinctly, is that you feel contained, you feel like a caged bird, and once you have that passport, you can finally experience the life that so many other people take for granted, or a life that is very privileged for a select few.
And Amal, that the passport is also not equal, is it? How is citizenship used these days by countries? Is it political? Is it about control? Is there a hierarchy?
I mean, there absolutely is. And I think if we think of constructs like passports or any immigration document for that matter, borders, citizenship to begin with, these are all constructs which are actually antithetical to human rights. Because if you truly believe in human rights and if you truly believe in the equality of all people, the dignity of all people, the idea that a legal status that can be ascribed to you or taken away from you will have a very direct impact on your quality of life, your experience, your risk of being detained, of being killed, of being experimented on, or being a victim of genocide, that these are all very real consequences of things that human beings have created. It's a deeply problematic way of organizing society that we need to find ways out of. And we're currently stuck in a trap, which is, I mean, you can see it playing out in Palestine and in Gaza, which is a very extreme consequence of the inequalities within our societies, which are kind of hinged on colonization, on empire, on extractive capitalism. And the passport is just another kind of symptom of that.
Well, let's take a moment to zoom into what passport privilege actually looks like. Here we have the top 5 strongest passports in the world. Now, these are the ones that open nearly every border, no questions asked. Singapore is number 1. Japan and South Korea are tied in the 2nd spot, and Denmark and Finland share 3rd, along with multiple other European countries like Spain and Germany. Now, let's take a look at the weakest passports. Those are the ones who face constant barriers and rejections. Afghanistan is at the bottom of the list. Then we have Syria, followed by Iraq. And the 4th weakest passport in the world is a tie between Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan. Dimitri, you have first-hand experience of this, don't you? You used to have, from what I understand, Soviet citizenship, and then you got a Dutch passport. And I was listening to your pre-interview, and suddenly everything changed for you overnight, even though, in a way, nothing about you had changed.
Exactly, because the status is everything when you cross borders. So you transition overnight from someone who is feared, who is presumed to be everywhere illegally and who shouldn't cross any border in the world, to someone who is welcome and who is fine. My education, my background, my accent, everything is the same. Yet the status is everything. So here I would like to agree with all the other panelists. This status is deeply problematic. But what is problematic in the status is probably not the fact that we have it, but what it is based on. And this is one of the last vestiges of the aristocracy principle that is observable around the world, because this is the last status that is based on blood. And this explains very well why there is such an overlap between the formerly colonized nations and poor passports of really detrimentally bad quality, compared with the richest nations of the world who distribute the best passports.
Amal, why is this shift so immediate? When you get to a border control and somebody looks at you and then they look at your passport, and that is an instant decision and a treatment that happens. Why is that?
I mean, it's because of the inequalities that are prevalent in the world. And I think studying passports and passport inequalities, studying statelessness as I do, are all entry points through which we can understand something that is deeply and structurally flawed in how we organize ourselves as human beings. I mean, if you look at statelessness, so statelessness is the extreme of passport, the lack of passport privilege. It's people who do not even have a citizenship to be able to access a passport to begin with. And the reason statelessness exists is because we have ascribed power to states to determine who belongs. And we have also ascribed power to states to determine privilege on the basis of belonging. And these two concepts go very much against human rights principles of equality, of the right to nationality, of access to other rights. And what has happened, therefore, is that we have handed over to states this technology of exclusion. And whether it's through statelessness, whether it's through deeming certain passports to be weaker or inferior, states have accumulated a great deal of autonomy and discretion and impunity through which to control, to limit access, to experiment on, and to border and other people. We see this also in the discourse around migrants, the way, even if you look at the media often speaks of illegal migrants, when actually the concept of a person being illegal is something which I certainly don't recognize, and I don't think anyone would if we actually stop to think about what that word means. But we have got used to these terms because we have got used to living in, and we completely normalized a world which is very unequal, and which, on the basis of a status which you can lose or you can gain for no reason other than the way a state applies its laws in a very discriminatory and arbitrary way, that on that basis your whole experience of life can be a very different one.
Actually, what you said there segues perfectly into a clip we want to play, because there is the discrepancy in the strength of passports, but then there are those, of course, who have no citizenship at all. Listen to this.
Imagine living in a world without a recognized home, where you are not officially a citizen. It is a reality faced by millions. It's called statelessness. But what is it exactly? Being stateless means there is no nationality, not belonging to any country. It is a legal limbo that strips individuals of basic rights, like access to education, healthcare, and the ability to work. As for myself, I'm not just a refugee, I'm also stateless. Because there is no home country that I can go back to or claim myself to be from. Because my parents are refugees and they are also stateless in their home country. Rohingya Muslims are not recognized as the citizen of Myanmar according to their constitution. Statelessness can happen for various reasons. Gaps in legal systems, discrimination, or even displacement. People can be born stateless or become stateless due to changes in borders or government policies.
Christy, when it comes to, we're talking about the concept of colonialism and how citizenship has been shaped in the wake of that. In Africa, it's not like the countries are very supportive of each other, right? I was reading, like, everybody also, you need visas. How do you break that down? Dimitri, I see you laughing. I'll come to you next. But how do you break that down?
Thank you for that. I think when the scramble for Africa was occurring, and at the Berlin conference, Africa was divided by different world powers. Borders were demarcated, separating people from the same tribe and people from the same communities. And so you'll have, for instance, in South Africa, a Zulu community, and across the border in Zimbabwe, you'll have the Ndebele people who speak a very similar language, have very similar cultural practices. And so the African example is a very complicated one, because border control and the creation of these colonial borders have just separated communities and cultures that were one. And so that is multi-layered, because it creates a very difficult sense of where people belong. And it's not according to, at least according to African cultural practices and identities. And so after colonialism, we've reinforced those borders, we've retained them, and haven't revisited how those were partitioned and divided. And so it complicates it, and it also perpetuates sentiments of xenophobia. In South Africa, there's a great prevalence of it. And to speak to Amal's point about the word illegality, we see a lot of the time in South Africa that this language is used to be divisive and create inequality, and it spurs xenophobic sentiments among South African citizens and migrants who are irregular but not illegal. And also because of those colonial structures, a lot of Africans don't recognize their fellow African sisters and brothers as being from one, as being collective or one. And so there's this need to distinguish and differentiate from each other, when true power, and I think true decolonization, will come from having a unified regional African passport like that, the East African, the community in West Africa has created. a travel document for their region. And that goes a long way to dismantle these constructs that were imposed on us, but also to change xenophobia, which I think spurs on this passport inequality and this privilege that others have and others don't have.
Dimitri, it's politics. It's also a massive money-making machine, isn't it? Let's take, for example, the Schengen visa. Millions need to apply for access to the Schengen region. We were reading a report by the Lego Collective saying that 130 million euros was collected just in rejected Schengen visas. We don't have the number of how much money there is collectively in the Schengen process application. There isn't an interest for these countries to abolish it. Certainly, it gives them control and it gives them millions and millions and millions of dollars.
But this control is also premised on their own starting point, because the assumption is that every U.S. citizen, however poor, however troubled, is fine and can come without a visa, while every Angolan citizen, however well educated and potentially useful, is trouble. So this kind of logic actually goes back to the essence of what citizenship is about. And here I would like to connect to what we discussed right before. Citizenship is a colonial concept, and it was used as a colonial management tool in order to reinforce racial hierarchies, which the European empires were installing all around the world. So even if the passports of empires would be seemingly spread equally around the population, the rights which would come with particular imperial statuses would actually differ based on race. And this was the global practice. So as a result of that global practice, for instance, if you are deemed Asian, you couldn't naturalize in the United States. If you are deemed Indian, you couldn't even travel to Canada. South Africa also had draconian restrictions on co-citizens, co-nationals from the same empire. So what I claim in my little book that MIT Press published is that, in fact, citizenship today is just a replication and justification of the former colonial racialized hierarchies.
Amal, is there a way that this is going to change, or is this here to stay?
Maybe before I answer that, if I can just quickly pick up on something that was said in that very good video about statelessness. I would like to slightly push beyond what the speaker there was saying, to also share that most stateless people I have encountered, they actually do feel very deeply rooted in their communities and their countries. And this idea that stateless people don't have a country or don't have a place to belong is a bit of a fiction. I think people are rooted, they have a place to belong, they have a place that they can legitimately call their own, and they have a lot to offer to those places. But what we see in the form of statelessness is the structural discrimination and exclusion of people to kind of deny them that belonging and to challenge it. Now, in terms of your question about what can be done, I think there's a lot that can be done. But in order for us to move in that direction, I think we still need to come to a bit of a reckoning as a society. I think those of us who are privileged, and privilege also is something to which there are varying degrees, we have been far too comfortable with status quos. And by being comfortable with status quos and by accepting them, we have normalized what if we actually stop to think about it, should in no way be the norm. And there's therefore a lot of unlearning that has to be done. There's a lot of challenging that has to be done. There's a lot of work that has to be done to envision a different world, which is not rooted in these structures of exclusion, these structures of dominance, these structures of exploitation, but rather is rooted in a basic dignity and value of all human life. Movements like the movement that Christy is co-leading on the global movement of statelessness, our efforts are very ground up, human-based efforts to try and offer a revisioning of society, to try and challenge the status quo. And we need to get behind those kinds of movements and those kinds of initiatives. And we need to recognize that it's absolutely not acceptable, it's not normal to have 2 million people being being bombed relentlessly, being starved relentlessly in Gaza with nowhere to go, that it's absolutely not acceptable to have thousands of people risking life and limb to cross borders and to cross seas, whether it's the Rohingya, whether it's North Africans leaving into Europe or wherever it may be. And this idea that the state can legitimately exercise power to treat people in such a demeaning and problematic way, and that we as a society and as societies have come to terms with that and are comfortable with that, and we actually live within this status quo and we benefit from it, is something that I think we need to see that change happening from within. And if there is one thing that we have seen coming out of the genocide in Palestine, is that there has been a bit of a global awakening to the fact that we cannot accept this as communities around the world. Now, what's stopping the change is that those who wield power have been using that power with great violence and effectiveness to carry on with impunity.
But you
and
say
there has
that,
to come a
don't
point
you? Sorry to jump in there, but you say that the society and the world has woken up and it's not acceptable. But what is being done? You know, there's still no change. The wars continue, the inequality continues, the genocide in Gaza continues. Christy, when countries say that all this is done for their own security and have to control migration, what do you respond to that?
I think that's a harmful excuse, because and also to Dimitri's point, like the origin of passport exclusion is discriminatory in nature. It's based on controlling people, and there's a way. It's about how many people can get in and how we can stop those people. And so I think economic controlling borders has been so weaponized, and using military to control border posts in South Africa, that's been something that has been done. And it perpetuates the harm and violence against vulnerable communities, and it doesn't create a safe pathway for them. And so I think that just is a harmful narrative that causes so much destruction, instead of creating a system that works, that does not demand too much. Is not a money-making scheme where people can't, even if they're trying to regularize their stay and use proper pathways of entry, they're barred by monetary constraints, they're barred by access to embassies and access to online platforms to apply. And so if we're not weaponizing and using border patrol and control as a way of imposing power and controlling a people, and we're using it to make sure that people have clear, safe pathways, then the narrative shifts. And so I don't think that is a sufficient excuse for using harm in patrolling borders.
Dimitri, I'm going to give the last word to you. The concept of citizenship, is it here to stay? Can it change?
That's a very good question. In fact, while I agree with Christy and with you, obviously, that it's about controlling borders, we should realize it's about controlling a certain part of the global population. So as a Dutch citizen, I can go anywhere and there are no borders for me. And the same applies to the majority of the richest nations, and to the sons and daughters and the grandchildren of those people, no matter where they settle. So it's about distinguishing by blood and then bringing down the majority of the global population, who is granted by this global system of international law the status of belonging to de facto third-rate kind of areas, as they would not be officially defined. So it's only a little part of the global population that benefits from this system, while the majority is being punished. And of course, this kind of system is a system of racial and sexist segregation, which has to go. And everybody realizes it, just as we heard also in our discussion. But the trouble is, we don't see it inside the states. Inside the states, citizenship works in order to ensure equality, in order to ensure precisely access to rights and services. So it's sold to us as something good. And the only way to start criticizing it with all the arguments at hand is to look at the world as a whole. And we don't have that perspective in the national democracies. So this perspective is missing by default, and we have to reintroduce it. So what is next? The next would be to abolish citizenship, I suggest. But whether it's realistic at this point is an open question.
Whether it's realistic is, of course, another question. Amal, Christy, and Dimitri, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you for being part of the conversation. And I'll see you soon.